Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step quietly onto a damp stone street in Amsterdam where the last of the daylight clings to the canal like a thin sheet of fading gold. The air carries a mix of water, wood smoke, and something faintly sour drifting from the edges of the city. You pause for a moment, letting your eyes adjust as lanterns begin to glow, one by one, small floating stars reflected in the dark surface below. Somewhere nearby, a rope creaks against a wooden mast, and the soft slap of water against brick seems almost rhythmic, as if the city itself is breathing. You are not here to admire it for long, because in just a short while you will be walking these streets alone, responsible for watching over a city that does not entirely trust the night. And if you are wondering whether this job is peaceful, comfortable, or even remotely safe, well, you probably would not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and the time where you are right now. There is something quietly reassuring about knowing where in the world someone else is listening from. Now dim the lights and let yourself settle into the slow rhythm of the evening as you take your first steps forward. The street beneath your boots is uneven, each stone worn smooth by the years of footsteps, cartwheels, and the steady passing of trade. Amsterdam in the 1600s is a city shaped by water and ambition, its canals carved with precision, its houses rising narrow and tall, leaning ever so slightly as if in conversation with one another. The day's noise has not fully vanished, but it is thinning. Voices drift from open windows. A door closes somewhere behind you. A final cart rattles past its driver, eager to be home before darkness deepens. There is a commonly accepted understanding among historians that cities like this were never truly silent even at night. Amsterdam in particular thrived on constant movement fueled by trade shipping and the restless energy of a growing republic. Even now, as the sky deepens into a softer shade of blue, you can sense that the quiet is only partial. You walk along the edge of a canal, the water reflecting the first scattered lanterns. It looks calm from a distance, but you know better. The surface hides currents, debris, and the occasional careless misstep that can turn a quiet night into something far more final. It is said in some lesser-known accounts that the canals claimed more lives than the city ever officially recorded, especially after dark when visibility faded and judgment followed. You draw a slow breath. The air feels different now, cooler, heavier, carrying the promise of night rather than the warmth of day. A faint bell rings somewhere in the distance, marking the passing of time in a way that feels both precise and strangely soft. The sound lingers for a moment before dissolving into the layered quiet. You continue walking, your pace unhurried, your attention drifting from one detail to the next. To your left, a row of houses stands close together, their facades marked by tall windows and narrow doors. Inside you catch glimpses of evening routines. A woman leans over a table, her hands moving steadily as she prepares food. A child sits nearby, half attentive, half lost in the slow pull of sleep. Candlelight flickers against the walls, casting shadows that shift with every small movement. There is a curious detail noted in some local records that many households kept their shutters partially open in the early evening, not just for air, but to remain connected to the street. It creates a strange feeling as you pass by, as though you are both observer and participant in a life that continues just out of reach. You move on. The street narrows slightly, the buildings pressing closer together. The light fades more quickly here, the lanterns fewer their glow, more contained. Your footsteps echo softly now, the sound absorbed and returned by the brick and wood around you. It's here in places like this that your future role begins to make sense. Because once the last of the daylight disappears, this stretch of street will belong to the night in a way that feels complete. And someone must walk it. Someone must notice if a door opens when it should not, if a shadow lingers too long, if a sound repeats when it has no reason to. You pause briefly at a small bridge, resting your hand against the cool wood of its railing. The canal below is darker now, its surface broken only by the faint ripple of movement. A boat passes slowly in the distance, its outline barely visible, its presence announced more by sound than sight. There is an ongoing discussion among scholars about how organised night watch systems truly were during this period. Some suggest they were structured and reliable, while others argue they were inconsistent, shaped more by local needs and individual effort than by any central authority. As you stand here listening to the quiet movement of water and wood, it becomes easier to believe the latter. Because what you are stepping into is not a perfect system, it is a human one. You straighten slightly and continue on crossing the bridge and entering a broader street. Here the last traces of daylight still linger, caught between the buildings and reflected in the windows. A few people pass by their steps, quick, their attention focused on reaching home. One man nods briefly as he passes you. Another avoids eye contact entirely. The city is transitioning, not abruptly but gradually, like a long exhale. You notice how the sounds begin to space themselves out. Instead of overlapping, they arrive one at a time. A footstep, a distant voice, the faint creak of wood settling. Each sound stands alone for a moment before fading, leaving a small pocket of silence behind. You walk through it all, your presence quiet, almost unnoticed, and yet soon that will change. Because when the night fully settles, your footsteps will no longer be just another part of the city's rhythm. They will become a signal, a reassurance to some, a warning to others. You reach the edge of a small square where a single lantern hangs higher than the rest, its light spreading outward in a soft circle. Beneath it the ground appears clearer, the shadows pushed back just enough to reveal the worn patterns of use. You step into the light for a moment, feeling its warmth against your face before continuing on the other side. Behind you the square begins to fade again. Ahead the streets grow darker, and the night patient and steady continues to unfold. The light behind you fades as you move deeper into the evening, and with it the last sense that you are simply a passer-by. The city no longer feels like something you are visiting. It begins to feel like something you are entering slowly, deliberately, as if crossing an invisible threshold that only exists after dusk. You turn down a quieter street, one less travelled, where the sounds are thinner and the shadows linger longer between the buildings. A wooden door stands slightly ajar ahead, its hinges worn, its surface marked by years of use. A faint glow spills out from within, steady and warm against the deepening blue outside. This is where you are expected. You step closer, your boots soft against the stone, and pause just long enough to notice the small details. The smell of oil and smoke drifting outward. The low murmur of voices inside. The faint scrape of a chair against the floor. It is not an official building in the grand sense. No towering entrance, no elaborate sign. Just a practical place chosen for its usefulness rather than its appearance. You push the door gently and step inside. The room greets you with warmth and a subtle heaviness, as if it has held many long evenings like this before. A few men are already gathered, their postures relaxed but attentive, their expressions somewhere between routine and quiet focus. A table stands near the centre, scattered with simple items, a lantern, a folded cloth, a cup left half full. They glance toward you as you enter, not with surprise, but with recognition. This is expected. It's widely accepted among historians that night watchmen in cities like Amsterdam were often drawn from ordinary citizens rather than trained professionals. Shopkeepers, craftsmen, labourers, men who had their own lives by day and took on this responsibility by necessity or obligation. As you stand there taking in the room, it becomes clear that you are not stepping into an elite group. You are stepping into something practical, something grounded, something humaner. One of the men nods toward you, a quiet acknowledgement that carries more weight than words. You return it, feeling the subtle shift within yourself as you move further into the room. The outside world with its fading light and scattered movement now feels distant. Here the night is already present. You take a place near the table, your hands resting lightly against its worn surface. The wood feels smooth in some places, rough in others, shaped by years of use rather than careful design. A faint mark catches your attention, a shallow groove near the edge, as if someone once pressed too hard too long, leaving behind a small trace of effort. There is a curious anecdote recorded in some local accounts that certain watchmen would carve tiny marks into shared tables to keep track of their shifts, a quiet way of counting time in a job where hours could stretch unpredictably. Whether this particular groove belongs to such a habit is unclear, but the thought lingers for a moment before drifting away. A voice breaks the quiet, not loud, just enough to gather attention. Instructions are given in a tone that feels practiced repeated many times before. There is no ceremony to it, no dramatic oath spoken under flickering light. Instead, it is simple, direct. You're told your route, your responsibilities, the areas that require extra attention tonight. Historians still argue whether formal oaths were consistently required for night watchmen in this period, or if the role relied more on informal agreements and community expectation. Standing here now, listening to the calm delivery of duties, it seems less like a solemn ritual and more like a shared understanding. You're here. You will walk. You will watch. That is enough. You listen carefully, committing each detail to memory. The canals that curve sharply, the narrow passage where trouble sometimes gathers, the warehouse district where goods rest behind locked doors but never entirely free from risk. Each location becomes a quiet point in your mind, a place you will soon move through, not as a stranger but as a presence. The man speaking gestures briefly toward a set of items arranged on the table. You step closer. A lantern rests there, its metal frame darkened from use, its glass slightly clouded but intact. Beside it, a wooden staff leans at an angle, solid and uncomplicated. And near it, a small rattle, its design simple, almost unremarkable at first glance. You reach out your fingers, brushing the surface of the lantern. It feels heavier than you expected. Not burdensome, but present, real. A commonly accepted fact about these tools is that they were less about force and more about visibility and sound. A watchman was not expected to overpower danger alone. Instead, he was meant to reveal it, to call attention to it, to become a moving signal that the night was not entirely unguarded. You lift the lantern slightly, testing its balance. The flame inside flickers, gently casting a small circle of light that shifts with your movement. It is not enough to illuminate everything, only enough to make shapes clearer, edges sharper, the immediate world more defined. The staff comes next. You wrap your hand around it, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your palm. It is sturdy, reliable, a tool that can steady your steps as much as it can warn others of your presence. There is no decoration, no unnecessary detail, just function. Then the rattle. You pick it up, turning it slightly, listening to the faint sound it makes even with the smallest movement. It is sharper than you expect, more urgent. A sound that cuts through quiet rather than blending into it or it. There is something almost reassuring about its simplicity. Noise carries, and in the night noise matters. You set the items down again, not yet ready to take them fully, but aware now of what they represent. This is not just equipment, it is identity. Once you step outside with these in hand, you will no longer be just another figure moving through the city. You will be the one watching. A brief pause settles over the room. No one rushes. There is time still. You notice how the others prepare in small, quiet ways. One adjusts the strap of his lantern. Another checks the edge of his staff, running his thumb along it as if confirming its familiarity. A third takes a slow sip from his cup, then sets it aside with a soft, deliberate motion. There is no anxiety here, only readiness. It is a subtle difference, but you feel it. You take a breath, letting it settle deep and even. The warmth of the room contrasts with the coolness waiting outside, and for a moment you are aware of the choice in front of you. To remain here in light and company, or to step back into the night carrying a small circle of light with you. You already know which you will choose, because this is why you came. The voice speaks again, softer this time, signaling the end of preparation. There is no formal dismissal, no final instruction, just a shared understanding that it's time. One by one the men begin to move. Lanterns are lifted, staffs are taken in hand. The door opens, and the night patient as ever waits just beyond. You follow, stepping back onto the stone street, your lantern, now casting its own quiet glow. The air meets you again, Cooler, now more settled, the last traces of day fully gone. Behind you the door closes with a soft final sound. Ahead the city stretches out in shadow and light, and this time you do not walk through it as a visitor. You walk as its watcher. The door settles shut behind you and the sound feels final in a way that is difficult to explain. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift that marks the beginning of something steady and unavoidable. The street greets you again, but now it is different. Not because it has changed, but because you have. The lantern in your hand casts a small contained circle of light that moves with each step you take. It reveals the ground directly ahead, the edges of nearby walls, the faint outline of a doorway or window. Beyond that, the darkness remains not empty, but layered and patient. You adjust your grip slightly. The staff rests in your other hand, its weight grounding you, its presence a reminder that you are not entirely without means if something goes wrong. And then there is the rattle hanging at your side, quiet for now, waiting. You begin to walk. Your pace is measured, not hurried, not slow. Somewhere in between, guided less by urgency and more by awareness. Each step feels deliberate, placed with care as if the street itself requires your attention. A widely accepted observation among historians is that night watchmen were as much a symbol as they were a function. Their presence alone could discourage trouble not through strength, but through visibility. As you move forward, the soft glow of your lantern announces you before your footsteps do. A figure appears ahead, emerging from a darker stretch of the street. He pauses when he sees you, his posture shifting slightly, not quite defensive, but not entirely relaxed either. You continue walking, your lantern lifting just enough to illuminate his face. There is a brief moment of quiet recognition. Then he nods. You nod in return. No words are exchanged, and yet something has passed between you. A mutual acknowledgement of roles. He is someone moving through the night. You are someone watching it. You continue on. The street curves gently following the line of the canal beside it. The water is darker now, almost indistinguishable from the sky above, except for the occasional reflection of light. A lantern from a distant bridge flickers across its surface, breaking apart with each small ripple. You hear it before you fully notice it. The sound of water touching stone. Soft, repeated, unchanging. It becomes a kind of quiet companion as you walk. There is a lesser-known detail found in some local accounts that the rattle carried by Watchmen was not only for emergencies but also used to reassure residents that the watch was present and active. A short burst of sound, deliberate and clear, could signal that all was well, or at least being observed. You glance down at it. Then, after a moment of consideration, you lift it slightly and give it a brief turn. The sound cuts through the night, sharp, distinct. It travels farther than you expect, echoing lightly against the walls or slipping through the narrow spaces between buildings. For a moment the street feels different, as if your presence has expanded beyond your immediate surroundings. Then the sound fades, and the quiet returns, but not quite the same as before. You lower the rattle, letting it rest again at your side, aware now of its purpose in a way that feels more immediate. You are not just walking, you are announcing. Your steps carry you onto a small bridge, the wooden planks beneath you responding with soft creaks that seem louder in the stillness. You pause near the centre, your lantern casting a light onto the railing and the water below. From here, the canal stretches in both directions, disappearing into shadow and faint glimmers of light. A boat is moored nearby, its shape still, its rope pulled tight. You notice how even the smallest details take on greater weight at night. A loose knot, a shifting reflection, a sound that repeats once, then not again. You listen, not for anything specific, just for anything that does not belong. Historians still debate how effective these nightly patrols truly were, especially in a city as busy and complex as Amsterdam during its golden age. Some suggest they maintained a sense of order, while others believe they offered more comfort than actual control. Standing here with the city spread quietly around you, it feels like both might be true, because you cannot see everything, you cannot hear everything, but you are here, and that matters. You move off the bridge and continue along the opposite side, your lantern light shifting with each step. The street here is narrower, the buildings closer their upper floors leaning slightly inward as if drawn together over time. A faint movement catches your attention. a window just ahead. A curtain shifts slightly, then settles. You slow your pace, not stopping but allowing your attention to linger. It is likely nothing more than someone adjusting their space, preparing for rest, or simply watching the night as you pass through it. Still you take note, because noticing is your work. You pass beneath the window, your lantern briefly illuminating the lower edge of the frame before moving on. The street continues, opening slightly into a small intersection where 3 narrow paths meet. You pause again, not out of uncertainty, but out of habit. This is where you choose direction. To the left, a darker stretch less travelled. To the right, a path that curves toward a busier area where taverns and late movement might still linger. Straight ahead, a quieter route lined with homes and the soft glow of occasional light. You consider for a moment, then choose left, not because it is safer, but because it is not. The darkness here feels thicker, the absence of light more complete. Your lantern becomes more important, its glow pushing back just enough of the night to allow you forward. Your footsteps sound different here, more contained, more present. You lift the rattle again this time, giving it a slightly longer turn. The sound feels stronger in this narrow space, bouncing back toward you, filling the street in a way that makes it feel briefly occupied, even if you're alone. You lower it slowly and continue. The air shifts as you move deeper into this part of the city. Cooler with a faint trace of damp wood and something older, less defined. The kind of scent that lingers in places that do not see much light. You pass a closed door, its surface worn, its handle dull from use. For a moment you imagine the life behind it. The quiet breathing of sleep, the soft settling of furniture, the pause that comes when a day is fully ended. And then you move on, because your night has not ended. It has only just begun. Your lantern sways gently with your steps, its light steady but never still. The staff in your hand remains firm, a quiet extension of your presence, and the rattle silent once more waits. You walk deeper into the darkness, your senses adjusting your awareness, sharpening in small, steady ways. You are learning, not through instruction, but through movement, through listening, through the simple act of being here. And as the city continues its slow transition into full night, you realize that this is not a role you step into all at once. It is something you grow into, step by step, sound by sound, light by light. You move further along the darker stretch, and after a while the absence of light begins to feel less like something you resist and more like something you accept. Your lantern still guides you, but your eyes are learning to work with less. Shapes emerge more slowly now, edges soften. The world becomes quieter, but not empty. The city after curfew carries a different kind of presence. It does not stop. It simply lowers its voice. You notice how doors are now firmly closed, their wooden surfaces absorbing the faint glow of passing light. Windows that once showed movement now hold only dim traces or nothing at all. The households have turned inward. What remains outside is thinner, more selective. Your footsteps seem louder. Not because you are making more noise, but because there is less to compete with it. A narrow alley opens to your right, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass without turning slightly sideways. You angle your lantern toward it, letting the light stretch into its depth. The walls are close damp in places, their surfaces uneven and worn. You step in, carefully. The air here feels cooler, trapped between the buildings, carrying a faint scent of moss and still water. Your staff taps lightly against the ground as you adjust your balance. The sound echoes more than it should, bouncing back toward you in a way that makes the space feel smaller. There is a broadly accepted understanding that curfews in early modern cities were not always strictly enforced in the way we might imagine today. Instead, they acted as a social signal, a shared agreement that night belonged to rest, caution, and limited movement. As you stand in this narrow space, it becomes clear that anyone still walking here has a reason, or a risk. You continue forward. Halfway through the alley you hear it, a soft shift. Not loud, but distinct enough to separate itself from the background quiet. You stop. Your lantern lifts slightly, its light reaching further ahead, revealing only the uneven wall and a small pile of discarded wood near the far end. Nothing moves now, no second sound follows. You wait a moment longer. Your breathing remains steady, even. Then slowly you take another step. There is a curious detail mentioned in some lesser-known municipal notes that watchmen often relied more on instinct than instruction when navigating uncertain moments like this. There were no detailed manuals, no formal training for every situation. Instead, experience built slowly, shaped by repetition and small decisions. You move forward again, your staff brushing lightly against the wall as you pass. The sound you heard does not return. Perhaps it was nothing more than settling wood or a small animal shifting in the dark. Or perhaps it was something that chose not to reveal itself. You exit the alley and return to a broader street where the air feels more open again. The difference is immediate. Space returns. The lantern light spreads more easily. The sense of being enclosed fades. You take a slow breath. The night continues. Ahead, the street curves, gently leading you past a row of tightly built houses. Their upper levels lean slightly forward, creating a subtle canopy that deepens the shadows below. A single lantern hangs from a bracket, its flame flickering in a way that suggests a faint breeze moving through. You pass beneath it, your own light briefly blending with its glow, then separating again. A figure appears at the far end of the street, standing still, not moving toward you, not moving away. You slow your pace slightly, your attention narrowing. The lantern in your hand lifts just enough to bring the figure into clearer view. A man wrapped in a coat, his posture rigid as if unsure whether to continue or retreat. You approach, not quickly, but with purpose. He shifts as you near, turning slightly to face you more directly. There is a brief pause, a moment where neither of you speaks, where the distance between you feels more significant than it actually is. Then you give a small nod. Your presence, your tools, your steady movement all speak before you do. He nods back, just once, and then he steps aside, allowing you to pass without a word. You continue forward, your pace unchanged, your attention already moving on. Encounters like this are not unusual. They are part of the rhythm of the night, brief intersections of purpose and uncertainty. There remains an ongoing scholarly discussion about how much authority night watchmen truly held in cities like Amsterdam. Some sources suggest they were respected figures of order, while others portray them as ordinary men with limited power relying more on presence than enforcement. As you walk, it feels closer to the latter. You are not feared, not entirely, but you are noticed, and sometimes that is enough. The street opens slightly, leading into a small crossing where multiple paths meet. The ground here is more worn, marked by heavier use during the day. Now it lies quiet, the patterns of movement pause but not erased. You stop briefly at the centre. Listen. A distant laugh carries faintly from somewhere beyond your immediate view. A door closes far away, the sound softened by distance, the faint ripple of what returns steady and unchanged. You lift the rattle again. This time you turn it twice. The sound spreads outward, filling the crossing, slipping down each path before fading. It lingers just long enough to make its presence known, then disappears, leaving behind a deeper quiet than before. You lower your hand and continue. The night feels more settled now, more complete. You notice how your movements have become smoother, less deliberate in a conscious way, more instinctive. Your body adjusts without instruction, your pace finds its own rhythm. You are no longer simply moving through the city, you are moving with it. A faint light appears ahead, softer than a lantern, warmer, more uneven. As you approach, you recognize it as firelight, likely from within a home where the hearth still burns. You pass by slowly, catching a brief glimpse through a small gap in the shutters. A figure sits near the fire, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of breath. Rest has taken hold here fully. You move on, because your rest will come later. Much later, the street narrows again, though not as tightly as before. The air carries a slightly different scent here, less damp, more touched by smoke, and something faintly sweet perhaps from earlier cooking. You let your attention drift outward once more, taking in the layered quiet, the scattered light, the steady presence of the city even in its most subdued state. And as you walk, you begin to understand something subtle but important. The night is not empty, it is simply selective. It reveals less. But what it reveals matters more. Your lantern sways gently. Your staff remains steady. The rattle rests silent again. and you continue forward deeper into the streets that now belong at least in part to you. You continue along the narrowing street, and gradually the character of the city shifts again. The houses here feel taller, more deliberate in their construction, their facades straighter, their windows larger and more evenly spaced. Even in the dim light you can sense a difference. This is a wealthier stretch where trade and success have left their quiet imprint on wood, brick and glass. Your lantern lifts slightly as you pass the first of these homes. The windows are taller than before, framed with care. Their surfaces clearer, reflecting your light rather than swallowing it. Behind them movement is slower, more contained. You catch glimpses of polished tables, carefully arranged objects, fabrics that fall more smoothly, more evenly. You do not stop, but you notice. There is a widely recognised fact that Amsterdam in the 17th century became one of the richest cities in Europe, fueled by maritime trade and a rapidly expanding global network. Merchants here did not just live comfortably, they lived visibly, their homes acting as quiet statements of success. As you walk, you begin to understand that your role is not just to guard against danger, it is to preserve this, the stillness, the order, the illusion that everything remains secure through the night. A faint glow spills from a lower window to your right. You glance toward it as you pass your lantern, briefly overlapping with the light inside. A man sits at a desk, his posture bent forward, his attention fixed on a sheet of paper. His hand moves steadily, the rhythm of writing slow but continuous. Even now, at this hour, there is a lesser-known observation noted in some merchant records that business in Amsterdam rarely adhered to strict hours. Letters were written late into the night, accounts, adjusted shipments reconsidered. The day did not always end when the sun disappeared. It simply changed pace. You move on. The street widens slightly, opening toward a canal that feels broader than the ones you have passed before. The water here reflects more light, catching the glow from multiple lanterns and windows, creating a surface that seems almost alive with shifting patterns. A large warehouse stands near the edge. Its doors are closed, but not hidden. The structure rises with purpose, its walls thicker, its presence heavier. This is not a home, this is storage. Goods from distant places stacked and counted, resting behind wood and iron. You slow your steps as you pass, not out of hesitation, but out of awareness, because places like this hold value in a way that attracts attention even at night. There is an ongoing line of interpretation among historians regarding how vulnerable these warehouses truly were. Some accounts suggest they were well protected through community vigilance, while others imply that theft and quiet intrusion were more common than official records admit. You let your lantern drift across the surface of the doors. Nothing moves, no sign of disturbance. Still you take note, because this is where your presence matters most. You continue along the canal, your footsteps steady or staff, occasionally brushing against the stone edge as you adjust your path. The water beside you feels closer here, its surface darker, its depth more apparent. A boat rests nearby, tied securely. Its cargo is covered, but not invisible. The shape beneath the cloth suggests weight important, something that has travelled far to arrive here. You pause briefly. Listen. The rope shifts slightly with the movement of water. The wood of the boat creaks, responding to small changes in balance. These sounds are not alarming, but they are present, and presence matters. You move on. Further ahead, another house stands with its shutters partially open. The light inside is brighter than most, spilling outward in a warm, steady line. As you pass, you catch a clearer glimpse within. A group sits around a table, not working, not resting, talking. Their voices are low, measured, but continuous. Hands move gently as they speak, gestures soft, controlled. There is a sense of ease here, of comfort that extends beyond the physical space. You notice how their world feels separate from yours, contained, protected. And for a moment you're aware of the quiet boundary between those who sleep within walls and those who walk outside them. You continue without slowing. There is a subtle anecdote recorded in some domestic accounts that families in wealthier districts often relied heavily on the presence of night watchmen, even if they rarely acknowledged them directly. The reassurance was expected, but not always spoken. You feel that now, in the way the windows glow, in the way the doors remain closed. In the way, no one steps outside to question your presence. You are part of the structure. Even if you remain on its edges, the street curves again, leading you away from the canal and into a quieter lane. The transition is immediate. The reflections of water disappear. The light becomes more contained. The air feels slightly warmer, less touched by the open space behind you. Your lantern sways gently as you walk its light, revealing the textures of the walls beside you. Here the buildings are still well kept, but less imposing. Smaller details stand out. A carved edge above a doorway, a carefully placed iron hook, a narrow step worn smooth from use. You pass a closed shop, its sign barely visible in the dim light. The goods within are hidden now, the day's commerce fully ended, yet the presence of trade lingers as if the space itself holds memory of movement and exchange. There is a continuing scholarly discussion about how deeply trade shaped the daily rhythms of Amsterdam's citizens, not just economically but socially and psychologically. As you move through these streets, it becomes clear that even at night that influence does not disappear. It simply settles. You adjust your grip on the staff, feeling the familiar texture beneath your hand. The weight of your tools no longer feels foreign. They have become extensions of your movement, part of the rhythm you're building with each step. A faint sound reaches you. Footsteps, steps, distant, approaching. You slow slightly, your attention sharpening as the sound grows clearer. It is not hurried, not uneven, just steady, deliberate, like your own. A figure appears ahead, emerging from a side street. This time there is no hesitation, no pause. He walks with purpose, his path crossing yours without acknowledgement. For a moment your lantern light catches his face, revealing little more than focus and direction. Then he passes, and is gone. You continue forward. Encounters like this begin to feel more familiar now, less uncertain. The night is not empty. It is shared but selectively. You lift the rattle once more. A single turn. The sound carries outward, touching the edges of the street, slipping into the spaces between buildings, then fading. You lower it again, aware now of how each small action shapes the atmosphere around you. The night deepens. The city settles further, and you continue your patrol, moving through wealth and quiet presence and absence, always just at the edge of what can be seen. The street ahead begins to change in a way you can sense before you fully see it. The quiet that has followed you so far does not disappear, but it becomes uneven, interrupted by pockets of sound that rise and fall without warning. A faint glow appears ahead, warmer and less controlled than the steady lanterns you have passed. You move toward it. The air shifts first. It carries the scent of smoke, thick and lingering, mixed with something sharper. Ale, perhaps, or spirits that have been poured and spilled in equal measure. The closer you get, the more the smell settles into you, clinging lightly to your clothes, your breath. Then the sound, voices, not soft, not measured, but loose, overlapping, sometimes rising too quickly before falling again. Laughter follows, uneven, sometimes genuine, sometimes forced. A chair scrapes, a cup strikes wood. The rhythm here is not calm, it is restless. You slow slightly as the source comes into view. A tavern. Its door is open just enough to let light and noise spill into the street. The glow inside flickers with movement, shadows shifting as figures lean, gesture, stand and sit again. You remain outside your position, steady, your lantern held low but visible. This is part of your route and part of your responsibility. It's generally understood that taverns in cities like Amsterdam were central to social life, especially for sailors, labourers and travellers. They offered warmth, conversation and escape from the routines of the day. But they also brought unpredictability, especially as the night deepened and judgment softened. You take a few steps closer, not entering, just enough to see. Inside, several men sit around a table. Their faces flushed, their movements less precise than they would be earlier in the evening. One leans too far forward, his voice louder than necessary. Another responds with a laugh that lingers a little too long. Nothing has crossed into trouble, but it is close enough that you remain attentive. There is a lesser-known note found in some city ordinances that tavern keepers were expected to maintain a certain level of order, though enforcement often depended on the presence of watchmen like you. Without that quiet oversight, small disruptions could grow more quickly than anyone intended. You shift your weight slightly, letting your lantern catch the edge of the doorway. Your presence is noticed. Not directly. No one calls out. But one of the men glances toward you, his expression sharpening for just a moment before settling again. The volume inside lowers only slightly, but enough to be felt. You do not need to speak. You do not need to step inside. You simply stand, and that is enough. After a few moments, you move on your pace, steady, your attention still aware of the sounds behind you as they begin to rise again once you leave the immediate area. The street beyond this tavern feels quieter by contrast, though. The echo of voices lingers faintly in the distance. You take a slow breath, letting the cooler air settle in again, replacing the warmth and density of the space you just passed. Your lantern swings gently with your steps. The light steadies. The rhythm returns. Ahead, another figure moves unsteadily along the edge of the street, his path uneven, his steps drifting slightly toward the canal before correcting. You approach with care, your attention focused, your movements controlled. As you near, he turns his head, his eyes taking a moment longer than usual to settle on you. There is a pause, then a small, uncertain smile. You stop at a respectful distance, not blocking his path, but not ignoring him either. You lift your staff slightly, not in threat, but in quiet acknowledgement, and gesture gently toward the center of the street, away from the canal's edge. He follows the motion, slowly. His steps adjust. There is no resistance. No argument, just a small correction, guided more by your presence than by instruction. This kind of interaction is rarely recorded in official documents, yet it forms a large part of the watchman's reality. Not dramatic confrontations, not heroic acts, but small interventions that prevent something worse from happening. You nod once. He nods back, though less clearly, and continues on his way. You remain still for a moment, watching until his figure disappears into a darker stretch ahead. Then you move again. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about whether night watchmen were truly effective in preventing crime, or if their role leaned more toward maintaining order in subtle everyday ways. As you walk, it becomes easiest to believe the latter, because what you do is not always visible, but it is constant. The street curves gently, leading you past another building where light spills out more softly. This one is quieter. The voices inside lower, more controlled. A different kind of gathering. Perhaps conversation rather than celebration. You pass without just slowing. Your attention shifts outward again. A window above creaks slightly as it is adjusted, then settles. Somewhere further down, a door closes with a firm but not hurried motion. The city continues its quiet sequence of endings. You lift the rattle, a short turn. The sound cuts cleanly through the air, sharper now after the lingering noise of the tavern. It feels almost precise, like a line drawn across the night, separating one moment from the next. Then it fades, and the calm returns more fully. Your steps carry you into another stretch of street where the buildings grow closer again, the light thinner, the atmosphere more contained. The scent of smoke lingers faintly, but it is softer now, less intrusive. You notice how your body is adjusted. The weight of the lantern no longer draws your attention. The staff moves naturally with your stride. Even the rattle feels familiar. Its presence no longer something you think about, but something you simply carry. You are settling into the role, not all at once, but gradually, through repetition, through attention, through the quiet understanding that the night does not require force as much as it requires presence. A faint breeze moves through the street, just enough to shift the edge of your coat and stir the flame within your lantern. The light flickers, then steadies again, casting its small, reliable circle ahead of you. You follow it, step by step. The sounds of the tavern have faded completely, now replaced once more by the softer rhythm of the city at rest. A distant bell marks another passing moment, its tone low and even. Time move. Whether you feel it or not, and your path continues carrying you forward through the shifting balance of noise and silence, order and uncertainty, always watching, always moving. The noise of the tavern dissolves behind you, not all at once, but in layers. First, laughter fades, then the murmur of voices, and finally even the faint scrape of movement disappears, leaving only the quieter tones of the street to return in their place. You follow the canal, Up the canal again. It curves gently beside you wider here, its surface darker and more still than before. The reflections have thinned, fewer lanterns reaching this stretch, fewer windows left uncovered. The water no longer flickers with light, it absorbs it. You slow your pace slightly, not out of hesitation, but because the space itself asks for it. The edge of the canal is marked only by a low barrier in some places, and in others nothing at all. Just stone meeting water with quiet indifference. You adjust your path instinctively, keeping a careful distance, your staff occasionally brushing the ground as a reminder of where you stand. There is a well-established understanding that canals were both the strength and the vulnerability of Amsterdam. They carried goods-shaped neighbourhoods and defined the city's identity. Yet at night they also introduced a silent risk, especially in areas where light was scarce and footing uncertain. You glance down. The surface reveals almost nothing, only the faint suggestion of movement where the water meets the edge. There is a small wooden post ahead, worn smooth at the top from years of ropes being tied and untied. A boat once rested here recently, perhaps earlier in the evening, perhaps only hours ago. Now it is gone, leaving behind only the mark of its presence. You pause for a moment beside it. Listen. The sound of water returns steady and soft, brushing against the stone in a rhythm that does not change. It feels constant in a way that the rest of the city does not. A detail occasionally mentioned in personal diaries from the period suggests that many residents feared the canals more than the street after dark. Not because they were dramatic or violent, but because they were quiet. A misstep, a moment of inattention, and the night could close over you without anyone noticing. You take a slow breath and continue. Your lantern casts a narrow path ahead, its light stretching just far enough to guide you, but never far enough to reveal everything. The darkness beyond remains intact, holding its distance, waiting. You pass another bridge. This one narrower, its wood slightly warped, its railing uneven in places. You step onto it with care, your boots producing a soft, hollow sound that carries further than you expect. The canal beneath feels deeper here, though you cannot see its bottom, only the suggestion of depth in the way the light fails to reach. Halfway across you stop, not because something is wrong, but because something feels different. The air is still, too still. You listen more closely, at first nothing, then faintly the sound of something brushing against water. Not the usual rhythm, slower, irregular. You angle your lantern downward, letting the light stretch toward the source. It reveals only a shifting pattern on the surface, something just beneath or just at the edge of visibility. You wait. The movement stops, then resumes, softer this time. You hold your position for a moment longer, your attention focused, your body steady. There is no immediate sign of danger, no clear shape, no sudden motion. After a few seconds you move again, carefully crossing the rest of the bridge without rushing your steps, deliberate to your lantern, steady. There is an ongoing line of thought among scholars that many of the dangers faced by watchmen were not dramatic events, but subtle uncertainties. Sounds without clear sources, movements that could be explained or could not. The challenge was not always in reacting, but in deciding when not to. You reach the other side and step back onto solid ground. The street here feels quieter still, as if even the distant activity has chosen to avoid this place. The buildings are spaced slightly further apart, their presence less imposing, their windows darker. You continue along the canal's edge, your path guided by memory as much as by sight. A faint breeze moves across the water just enough to disturb its surface, breaking the stillness into small shifting patterns. The lantern light catches them briefly, then loses them again. You notice how your awareness has deepened, not in a dramatic way, but in small, steady adjustments. You hear more, you see differently, you anticipate. A soft sound reaches you from ahead. Footsteps, light, quick. You lift your lantern slightly, letting the glow stretch further into the darkness. A figure appears, moving at a faster pace than most you have seen tonight, not running but close to it. As the figure nears you, step slightly to the side, your presence clear, your posture steady. The person passes you without slowing. A brief glance, no words, just movement. You turn your head slightly, watching as the figure continues along the canal, their pace not easing even as they disappear into shadow. There is a small, often overlooked note in some local accounts that not all nighttime movement was suspicious. Some people moved quickly because they needed to, because the night while quiet was not always safe for those alone. You face forward again and continue. Your steps return to their steady rhythm, your lantern swaying gently, your staff grounded with each movement. The canal remains beside you, its presence constant, its silence deeper than any street. You lift the rattle, a longer turn this time. The sound spreads wide over the water, carrying further than it does between buildings. It feels different here, less contained, more exposed. Then it fades, leaving behind a quiet that feels even more complete. You lower your hand and walk on. The city feels distant in this stretch, as if you have stepped slightly outside its centre into a place where fewer eyes look out and fewer voices remain. Yet your role does not lessen here. If anything, it sharpens, because this is where absence becomes noticeable, where silence carries weight. You follow the curve of the canal as it begins to bend back toward more populated streets, the faint suggestion of light returning ahead subtle but present. And as you walk, you understand something more clearly than before. The water is not just part of the city, it is part of the night. Watching, waiting, always there beside you. The canal begins to fall behind you as the street turns inward away from open water and back into a tighter weave of buildings. The air changes almost immediately. Less damp, more enclosed, carrying the faint scent of wood ash and something dry that lingers between walls that have held warmth all day. Your lantern light feels stronger here, not brighter, but more contained. It settles against surfaces instead of drifting away, revealing textures that might go unnoticed in daylight. The grain of a door, the uneven line of mortar between bricks, the faint mark where something once hung and no longer does. You continue forward, your pace steady, your attention widening, because this part of the city carries a different kind of risk. You notice it first in the chimneys. Several rise above the rooftops, their outlines visible against the darker sky. Some release faint threads of smoke, thin and controlled. Others show nothing at all, suggesting fires already reduced to embers. You slow slightly, lifting your lantern to glance upward as you walk. Fire is quiet, until it is not. It is broadly recognized that one of the greatest dangers in cities like Amsterdam was not crime but fire. With so many wooden structures built close together, a single spark left unchecked could spread quickly, moving from roof to roof before anyone had time to respond. You pass beneath a window where a dim orange glow still lingers inside, a hearth not yet fully extinguished. You pause just long enough to observe. The light flickers, steadily contained within its space, showing no sign of reaching beyond its bounds. Still, you take note. A fire left unattended too long can shift without warning, especially as the night deepens and those inside fall into sleep. You move on. The street narrows further, the buildings leaning inward slightly, creating a channel that traps warmth and scent. The air feels thicker here, touched by smoke that has settled and stayed. Your staff taps lightly against the ground as you adjust your stride. A soft rhythmic sound, reassuring. There is a lesser discussed detail in some municipal records that watchmen were expected to remain particularly alert for signs of fire, sometimes even more so than for theft or disturbance. The consequences of missing such a sign were far greater than most other risks. You glance again at the rooftops, at the chimneys, at the faint traces of smoke that still drift upward, thinning as they rise. Everything appears as it should. For now, a small alley branches off to your left, its entrance partially obscured by shadow. You angle your lantern toward it, letting the light stretch into its narrow depth. The ground there is darker, the stones less worn, suggesting fewer footsteps pass through regularly. You hesitate briefly, then step in. The air cools as you enter the scent of smoke fading, replaced by something more neutral, more still. Your footsteps echo softly, contained by the close walls. Halfway down you notice it. A faint smell, different, sharper. Not the soft, lingering smoke of a controlled fire, but something more immediate. You stop. Your lantern lifts. The light reveals a small stack of materials near the wall. Woodcloth, perhaps remnants of something discarded. Nothing appears actively burning, but the scent remains subtle but present. You step closer, carefully, Your staff presses lightly against the ground as you lean in just enough to inspect without disturbing. The materials are dry, loosely arranged. No glow, no visible ember. And yet, the smell lingers. There is an ongoing discussion among scholars about how often fires began from overlooked or misunderstood sources, small moments that seemed harmless until they were not. A single ember carried by air, a piece of cloth too close to heat, a detail missed. You remain still for a moment longer, listening, watching. Nothing changes. No sound of crackling, no shift in light. After a few seconds, you straighten and step back. You will remember this place, and you will return to it later in your route. Because watching once is not enough. You exit the alley and return to the main street, your awareness slightly heightened. Now your attention more focused on the spaces between certainty and doubt. Your lantern sways gently as you walk its light, steady but alert as if responding to your own shift in focus. Ahead, a row of homes stands quiet, their windows dark, their doors closed. The warmth that once filled them has settled inward, leaving the exterior cool and still. You pass beneath another chimney. This one releases a faint trail of smoke thinner than the others, almost disappearing as it rises. You pause again, glancing upward, then toward the window below. No light, no movement, only the suggestion that something still burns within. There is a curious note found in some personal writings that many residents feared falling asleep with their fires not fully extinguished yet, at the same time relied on them for warmth through the night. It created a quiet tension, a balance between comfort and risk. You move on, your step steady, your breathing even. The street begins to widen slightly, the buildings pulling back just enough to allow the air to move more freely again. The scent of smoke softens, replaced by the cooler tones of night. You lift the rattle, a measured turn. The sound carries through the space, sharp and clear, cutting across the stillness with purpose. It feels appropriate here, a reminder that the quiet is not unobserved. Then it fades. You lower your hand and continue. The sense of vigilance remains with you now, not heavy but present, like a thread woven through your movements. You notice how your eyes linger a little longer on each detail, how your ears hold on to sounds just a moment more. You are not searching for something specific. You're allowing for the possibility that something might be there. The street ahead bends gently, leading you toward another intersection, where the faint glow of distant lanterns begins to return. The city does not sleep evenly. It shifts, breathes, settles in some places while remaining alert in others. You follow the curve, your lantern guiding you, your staff grounding you, the rattle quiet once more. And as you walk, you carry with you the quiet understanding that the greatest dangers of the night are not always loud or sudden. Sometimes they begin in silence, in warmth, in something so small it almost escapes notice, until it does not. The street opens into a broader stretch, and with it comes a subtle return of sound. Not loud, not crowded, but present in a way that feels more structured. The city here has not gone fully quiet. It has settled into something measured, almost deliberate, as if each sound knows its place. You slow slightly, not because you must, but because this is where your role becomes more visible. A faint bell rings in the distance, then another. Not random, not scattered, but timed. You recognize it immediately. This is where you begin to call the hours. You adjust your grip on the lantern, lifting it just a little higher, letting the light fall more clearly around you. Your posture shifts almost without thought, your presence becoming more defined, less like a passerby and more like something expected. There is a well-documented practice across many European cities during this period where night watchmen would announce the passing of time at regular intervals. It served more than one purpose. It reassured those awake that the night was being watched, and it reminded those who listened that time continued even in darkness. You take a breath, slow, even. Then you speak. Your voice carries forward into the street, steady but not forceful, shaped by repetition more than performance. The words are simple, marking the hour, offering a quiet assurance that all remains as it should be. The sound travels further than your footsteps, further than your lantern light. It touches the edges of the street slip between buildings, rises just enough to reach windows where sleep has not yet fully taken hold. Then it fades, leaving behind a different kind of quiet. You continue walking, and after a short distance you repeat it. The rhythm begins to form. Walk, pause, call, walk again. There is a lesser-known detail found in some city descriptions that the exact phrasing of these hourly calls could vary between districts, sometimes including brief blessings, warnings, or reminders depending on local custom. The two voices carried the night in exactly the same way. You become aware of your own voice now, not as something separate from you, but as part of the work. Each time you speak, you shape the space around you, even if only for a moment. A window above shifts slightly, a faint movement behind glass. Someone listening. You do not look up directly, you simply continue. The street curves gently, leading you past a row of homes where the shutters are mostly closed, but not completely. Small gaps allow thin lines of light to escape soft and steady. Inside, life continues in quiet ways. You pass beneath one such window and hear the faint sound of fabric moving. Perhaps someone adjusting a blanket, perhaps someone pausing to listen more closely as your voice reaches them. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about whether these nightly calls truly improved safety or simply reinforced a sense of order. As you walk, it feels less like enforcement and more like presence, a way of reminding the city that it's not entirely alone. You call the hour again, your voice steadier now, more certain. It no longer feels unfamiliar. It belongs here. You move toward another intersection where a narrow lane meets a wider path. The ground here shows signs of heavier use though. Now it lies quiet, its daytime purpose paused. A figure stands near the corner, still, listening. As your voice fades, the figure nods slightly, though you cannot be sure if the gesture is meant for you or simply a response to the sound itself. You pass without speaking. Your role does not require conversation. It requires continuity. You continue along the wider path, your lantern casting a broader circle now that the space allows it. The light touches more surfaces, reveals more detail, but also leaves more beyond its reach. You lift the rattle, a short turn. The sound follows your voice, sharper, more immediate, reinforcing your presence in a way words alone cannot. Then silence again, a pattern emerging. You begin to notice how the night responds, not dramatically, but subtly. A door that was slightly open is now closed, closed. A shadow that lingered shifts and disappears. A light dims just a fraction. The city adjusts, not because of you alone, but with you. There is a small detail mentioned in some personal writings that certain residents found comfort in recognizing the specific voice of their local watchman, noting changes in tone or rhythm as signs of familiarity or unease. Over time, the voice itself became part of the neighborhood. You wonder briefly if that will become true for you. If your voice will settle into this place, recognized not as something new, but as something expected. You call the hour again. This time it feels different, not louder, but more grounded, as if it carries not just sound, but intention. You continue walking your steps, aligning with the rhythm you have created. The lantern sways in time. The staff moves naturally with each stride. The rattle rests ready when needed. The city stretches ahead, a series of quiet spaces connected by your movement, your voice threading them together in small, steady intervals. A faint breeze moves through the street, soft enough to shift the edge of your coat to flicker the flame within your lantern. The light responds, dancing briefly before settling again. You follow it. Call, walk, pause. Call again. Time moves forward, and through your voice the night acknowledges it. The rhythm of your voice lingers behind you as you move forward, fading into the layered quiet of the street. For a time, everything feels balanced. Measured steps, steady breath, a pattern you can follow without effort. Then the weather shifts. It begins so lightly that you almost miss it. A faint touch against your cheek. Cool. Then another. You pause briefly, lifting your gaze. The sky offers no clear warning, only a deeper shade of darkness that seems to press a little closer than before. A thin mist settles into the air, soft at first, almost gentle. Rain. You adjust your grip on the lantern, angling it slightly to shield the flame. The glass flickers as a droplet lands, then steadies again. The light holds, but you can feel how easily it could fail if the rain strengthens. Your steps continue. Slower now, more deliberate. The ground begins to change beneath you. The stones grow slick, their surfaces reflecting your lantern in scattered fragments. Each step requires a little more attention, a little more care. It's widely noted in records of early modern cities that weather played a significant role in shaping nightly patrols. Rain, fog and cold did not stop the watch. They made it harder, less predictable and far more uncomfortable. You feel that now. The mist thickens, settling into a steady fall that softens the edges of everything around you. The buildings lose some of their sharpness, their outlines blending slightly into the night. Sound changes too. Footsteps become quieter. Distant noises feel further away. The world contracts. You lift the rattle and give it a brief turn. The sound is different in the rain. Muted. It carries but not as cleanly, its sharpness softened by the moisture in the air. It fades more quickly, absorbed rather than echoed. You lower it again and continue. A faint breeze follows the rain, not strong but persistent enough to push the mist sideways, creating shifting patterns that pass through your lantern light. For a moment it feels as though the air itself is moving around you, not against you but through you. You pull your coat closer, not tightly, just enough. The damp begins to settle in, not immediately uncomfortable, but present a slow reminder that the night is no longer still. There is a lesser-mentioned observation in some personal accounts that experienced watchmen learned to read the weather as part of their patrol, understanding how it altered sound visibility and behaviour. A quiet street in clear air did not feel the same as a quiet street in rain. You begin to notice those differences. The way your footsteps sound softer, the way your lantern light spreads less evenly, the way even your breathing feels more contained. You turn onto a narrower street where the buildings draw closer again, offering slight shelter from the falling rain. The mist still reaches you, but less directly, its movement slowed by the structure around you. A faint glow appears ahead, warmer, steadier. You move toward it. A doorway stands partially open, light spilling out in a soft line across the wet ground. Inside you can see a figure seated near a small fire, their posture relaxed, their movement slow. For a moment you feel the contrast, warmth, dryness, stillness. Then you continue past, because your place remains outside. There is an ongoing academic discussion about how night watchmen balanced endurance with responsibility, especially in difficult conditions. Some suggest that fatigue and discomfort shape their effectiveness more than any formal duty. You feel that beginning now, not as exhaustion, but as awareness. The weight of the lantern, the dampness of your clothes, the subtle tension in your steps as you adjust the slick ground. You move forward, your pace steady but more cautious, your attention fixed not just on what lies ahead but on where you place each foot. A figure approaches from the opposite direction, slow, deliberate. As you near, you see that the person carries no lantern, their shape emerging only when your light reaches them. Their faces partially shadowed, their expression difficult to read. You lift your lantern slightly higher. They pause, just for a moment, then step aside, allowing you to pass successively. No words, no gesture, only the quiet acknowledgement of your role. You continue on your lantern light, briefly illuminating the path behind you before the darkness closes in again. The rain steadies, not heavy, but constant. It settles into a rhythm that matches your steps, a soft, continuous sound that blends with the quiet of the city. You lift your voice again, calling the hour. The sound feels different now, less sharp, more absorbed. It reaches outward, but not as far, its edges softened by the rain. Still it is heard, even if only faintly. You lower your voice and continue, your breath visible now in the cooler air, your movements guided by habit more than thought. The street opened slightly, leading you toward another canal, its surface disturbed by the falling rain. Small ripples spreading outward in endless, overlapping circles. You pause briefly at the edge. Watch. The water reflects your lantern in broken fragments, each ripple shifting the image, never allowing it to settle. There is a subtle note found in some observational writings that weather often revealed the vulnerability of the watch more clearly than any other condition. Not through danger, but through persistence. The night did not need to overwhelm you, it only needed to continue. You take a slow breath, then step forward again. The rain continues, the city remains, and you walk on your presence, quieter now, your movements more contained yet no less steady. Because the night does not pause for weather, And neither do you. The rain eases as you move away from the canal, not stopping entirely, but softening into a fine mist that settles more than it falls. Your coat holds the damp now, no longer gathering, just carrying it with you as part of the night. The street ahead grows quieter again, not empty, but inward. You begin to notice the windows more closely, not the bright ones you passed earlier, where activity spilled outward, but the softer ones. The ones where light lingers in a muted way filtered through fabric diffused across glass. These are not places of work or gathering. These are places of rest, or something close to it. You slow your pace slightly as you pass the first. Through the thin curtain you can make out the outline of a room, its shape softened, its edges blurred. A figure moves within, slow and deliberate, their presence quiet enough that it almost feels like part of the room itself. You do not stop, but your attention remains. There is a well-supported understanding among social historians that much of domestic life in cities like Amsterdam continued into the late evening hours, especially for women whose responsibilities often extended beyond the visible end of the day. Cooking, mending, preparing for tomorrow. Tasks that filled the spaces after public life had withdrawn. You see that here, in the way the figure moves, in the way the light remains, in the way the window does not fully close itself off from the street. You continue on. Your lantern light brushes gently across the lower edge of the window, then moves away, leaving the interior untouched once more. The next house is darker. No light, no movement, only the faint reflection of your lantern as you pass. You notice how the difference between these spaces feels more pronounced at night. During the day they would blend together, part of a continuous row of activity. Now each one stands alone, defined by what it reveals or conceals. A small sound reaches you from above, soft, repetitive. You pause, lifting your gaze slightly. A window opens just enough to release a small bundle of water poured carefully into the street below. It lands with a quiet splash, then settles into the stone, disappearing as if it had never been there. The window closes again, gently. There is a curious note found in some household records that nighttime routines often included small practical acts like this, clearing away what remained from the day. These moments rarely appeared in official accounts, yet they formed a steady rhythm beneath the larger patterns of city life. You move on. The mist continues to drift soft against your face, barely noticeable now unless you focus on it. Your lantern remains steady, its flame protected its light, consistent despite the damp air. Ahead, another window glows more brightly than the rest. You approach. This one is not covered. The view inside is clear. A woman sits at a table, her hands moving with quiet precision as she works with fabric. The motion is steady, practiced, her attention focused on each small detail. Beside her a candle burns low, its flame wavering slightly with the movement of air. You slow slightly, not stopping, just allowing the moment to extend her. She does not look up. Her world remains contained within the walls of the room, the rhythm of her work uninterrupted by your passing. There is an ongoing discussion among scholars about how visible or invisible such domestic labour was during this period. While records often emphasise trade and public life, the quieter work within homes rarely received the same attention despite its constant presence. You feel that now, in the stillness, in the focus, in the way the night holds space for both your movement and her stillness at the same time. You continue forward. The street narrows again, the buildings drawing closer, their upper levels leaning slightly inward. The mist collects here more noticeably, lingering in the air, softening the edges of everything it touches. Your footsteps remain steady, your breathing even. A faint voice reaches you, not from the street, but from within a house. Low, gentle, perhaps speaking to a child, perhaps simply speaking into the quiet. You cannot make out the words, only the tone. It carries a softness that feels distant from your own role, yet connected in a way that is difficult to name. You lift the rattle, a brief turn. The sound moves through the mist, its edges softened, its reach shortened but still present. It touches the windows, the doors, the spaces where light lingers, then fades. You lower your hand and continue. There is a small detail noted in some personal writings that residents often listened for the watchman's signal, not just as a sign of safety, but as part of the night's rhythm, something that marked time in a way that clocks alone could not. You begin to understand that now. Your movement, your sound, your voice. They are not separate from the night. They are part of it. The street opens slightly, revealing a small courtyard where several homes face inward rather than toward the main road. The space feels more private, more contained, the sounds here quieter still. You step into it briefly. Your lantern light spreads across the ground, revealing worn patterns where footsteps have passed again and again. The windows here are smaller, their light softer, their presence more subtle. You pause, listen. Nothing unusual, just the quiet continuation of lives lived behind walls. You step back out onto the street, the mist thins slightly, the air shifting once more as you move toward a broader path. The sense of enclosure fades, replaced by a more open, though still subdued atmosphere. You take a slow breath. The dampness remains, but it no longer distracts. It simply exists. Your steps carry you forward, your awareness steady, your presence unchanged. And as you pass the final window in this stretch, its light dim, its movement nearly gone, you realize something quietly important. The night is not only what happens outside, it's also what continues within, unseen, unspoken, but always there. And you walk between both worlds, never fully belonging to either, yet essential to the balance between them. The courtyard fades behind you as the street widens again, and with that widening comes a subtle return of movement. Not the loose noise of taverns, not the quiet stillness of homes, but something in between. A sense that the night is still being used, though carefully. You follow the curve of the street, your lantern casting a steady glow ahead. The mist has thinned now, leaving the air clearer, though still cool. Your coat carries the memory of rain, but your steps feel lighter as the ground grows less slick beneath you. A figure appears at a distance, then another. They do not move together, but they share the same direction. Toward you. You slow slightly, not stopping, allowing your presence to become clear before the distance closes. Your lantern lifts just enough to reveal your face, your tools, the steady rhythm of your steps. The first figure approaches, a man dressed in layers that suggest travel rather than residence. His coat is worn at the edges, his posture alert, as if measuring the space around him with each step. He glances toward you, his expression cautious but not hostile. You meet his gaze briefly, then nod. He returns it. A small acknowledgement, but enough. He continues past without speaking. The second figure follows shortly after. This one carries a small bundle held close, wrapped tightly against the cool air. Their pace is slower, more deliberate, as if each step is chosen carefully rather than taken out of habit. You shift slightly to give space. They pass you quietly, their presence leaving only the faint sound of footsteps behind. There is a well-documented understanding that cities like Amsterdam drew people from across regions and beyond, especially during periods of trade expansion. Not everyone you encounter belongs to the immediate neighborhood. Some are passing through, some are arriving, some are leaving. You continue forward, your attention sharpens, because strangers bring uncertainty, not always danger, but always something unknown. A small intersection appears ahead where three streets meet at uneven angles. You pause briefly at the center, your lantern, casting light outward in three directions at once. Each path holds its own quiet, its own set of possibilities. You listen. From the left, nothing. From the right, a faint echo of movement, distant but present. Straight ahead, stillness. You choose the right, not because it calls to you, but because it does not remain silent. As you walk, the sound becomes clearer. Footsteps again, more than one. You slow your pace, allowing your approach to be noticed before you arrive too close. The lantern lifts slightly, your presence to find your role clear. Two figures stand near the edge of the street, partially turned toward each other. Their conversation stops as your light reaches them. For a moment, neither moves. Then one speaks, brief, low. You cannot make out the words. The other responds with a nod. They step apart, creating space, their attention shifting toward you, then away again as you pass. There is a lesser discussed detail found in some city accounts that night. Watchmen often relied on presence rather than confrontation when dealing with uncertain situations. The act of being seen was often enough to change behavior. You feel that here. No questions asked. No challenge made. Just a quiet adjustment in response to your approach. You continue forward, The street narrows slightly, then opens again, leading you past a row of buildings that appear less uniform than those you have seen before. Some lean more noticeably. Others show signs of repair, their surfaces uneven, their lines less precise. This part of the city feels different, less polished, more varied. You notice how the light behaves here, less consistent. Some windows glow brightly, others remain dark. A few flicker as if uncertain whether to remain lit or not. A faint sound reaches you from one of the darker doorways. A shift. A movement. You stop. Your lantern lifts. The light reveals a figure standing just inside the threshold, partially hidden by shadow. Their posture is still, their face not fully visible. You wait. A moment passes. Then another. They do not step forward. They do not retreat. They simply remain. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how much discretion watchmen exercised when encountering ambiguous situations. Not every shadow required action. Not every presence demanded inquiry. You hold your position briefly, then lower your lantern slightly, and move on, because not everything must be resolved. Some things simply exist. You continue along the street, your step steady, your awareness balanced between attention and restraint. The night does not reveal everything clearly. It asks you to decide what matters and what does not. A faint breeze moves through the space, carrying with it a mix of scents. Smoke, damp wood. Something faintly unfamiliar, perhaps from wood recently unlaid and yet. You follow the street as it curves, again leading you toward another crossing. The sound of movement fades behind you, replaced once more by the quieter tones of the city at rest. You lift the rattle, a measured turn. The sound spreads outward, touching the edges of the street, slipping into the spaces where figures may still linger, where movement may still continue unseen. Then it fades. You lower your hand and continue. Your role feels clearer now, not as something defined by strict rules, but as something shaped by presence, by judgment, by the ability to move through uncertainty without forcing it into clarity. You walk on your lantern, steady your staff firm, your senses attuned to the subtle shifts that define the night. And as you leave this stretch behind, you carry with you the quiet understanding that not every stranger is a threat, but every stranger is a question. And tonight you are the one who must decide which questions require an answer. The street carries you onward, away from the uncertain figures and into a quieter stretch where the city seems to draw a slower breath. The buildings here feel older, their surfaces darker, their shapes less precise. Time has settled into them in a way that softens edges and deepens shadows. You notice the first bell before you see its tower, a low tone, steady, measured. It rolls across the air rather than cutting through it, reaching you not as a sharp sound but as a presence that settles around you. You lift your gaze following its source, and there it stands above the rooftops. A church tower. Its outline rises into the night, its details mostly lost to darkness, but its shape unmistakable. You slow your steps, not out of necessity, but out of something quieter, awareness. There is strong historical agreement that churches played a central role in structuring both time and community life in early modern European cities. Their bells marked hours, gatherings, and moments of importance, creating a shared rhythm that extended even into the night. You feel that now. The sound does not demand your attention. It simply holds it. You passed along the edge of the churchyard, the ground shifting slightly beneath your boots. Less stone, more earth. The air feels different here, cooler, touched by open space and something older. The lantern light reaches only so far. Beyond it, shapes gather. Gravestones low and uneven, some leaning, others nearly flat against the ground. Their details are lost in shadow, their presence felt more than seen. You continue forward, your pace steady, your posture unchanged. There is a lesser noted observation found in some personal writings that churchyards at night often carried a quiet weight not because of fear but because of stillness. A kind of stillness that felt separate from the rest of the city. You feel that here. The sounds are fewer, more distant. Even your own footsteps seem softer, as if the ground absorbs them more completely. A faint movement catches your attention to the side. You turn your lantern slightly. A cat, It slips between the stones, its shape quick and silent, its eyes briefly catching the light before disappearing again into shadow. You watch for a moment, then continue. There is an ongoing academic conversation about how much superstition influenced nightly patrols during this period. While official duties remained practical, personal beliefs often shaped how individuals perceived certain spaces, especially those tied to death or religion. You notice how your awareness shifts here, not fear, but sensitivity. You listen more closely, watch more carefully. A soft sound reaches you, not from the ground, from above. A window in the church tower, barely visible, releases a faint flicker of light, then dims again. Perhaps a caretaker, perhaps someone finishing a late task. The building is not entirely asleep. Few places are. You move past the churchyard, returning to stone as the street resumes its usual form. The transition is immediate. Sound returns more clearly, the air feels less still. You take a slow breath. Your lantern steadies. Your steps regain their familiar rhythm. Ahead, the street bends gently, leading you past a row of smaller buildings, their shapes less imposing, their details simpler. A faint glow appears in one of the windows, softer than before, almost fading. As you pass, you hear it. A quiet murmur, not conversation. Not quite. More like a voice reading softly, the words too low to distinguish, but the cadence steady, continuous. You slow slightly. Listen. The sound continues unbroken, as if the reader is unaware of anything beyond the page. There is a small, often overlooked detail mentioned in some accounts, that reading aloud remained a common practice in this period even in private spaces. It filled the room, shaped the rhythm of thought, and at times offered comfort in the quiet hours. You move on. The voice fades behind you, replaced once more by the softer tones of the street. You lift the rattle. A brief turn. The sound carries outward, touching the walls, slipping into the spaces between buildings, then fading into the night. You lower it again, and continue. The bell sounds once more behind you, a deeper tone this time, marking another passage of time. You do not turn back, but you feel it. The night is moving. Whether you measure it or not, your path carries you forward away from the church, away from the stillness of the yard, back into the layered life of the city. The streets ahead hold more variation, more subtle movement, more signs that the night is not a single state but a series of shifts. You follow that, step by step, your lantern guiding you, your staff grounding you, the rattle quiet at your side. And as you walk, you begin to understand something that cannot be easily explained. The night is not only something you watch, it is something you move through, something that changes as you pass. Something that holds both the weight of silence and the quiet continuation of life at the same time. And here between bell and shadow, between stone and memory, you carry that balance forward one step at a time. The bell's final tone fades behind you and the air seems to settle again into a quieter balance. The street ahead feels more enclosed, not by walls alone, but by a certain closeness in the way the buildings lean, the way the light narrows, the way sound travels shorter distances before dissolving. You continue at your steady pace. Lantern low, staff firm, breath even. This part of the city feels more watchful, not because of any single detail, but because of many small ones gathered together. A window that closes more quickly than expected. A shadow that shifts just as your light reaches it. A door that seems to hold its silence too tightly. You notice these things, not with alarm, but with attention. There is broad agreement among historians that much of what was considered crime in early modern cities often began long before any act was committed. Tension, suspicion, small disagreements between neighbours. These things built slowly, sometimes unnoticed, until they found a moment to surface. You sense that here, not clearly, but enough. A narrow passage opens to your right, its entrance partially hidden between two closely set buildings. You angle your lantern toward it, letting the light stretch just far enough to reveal the ground and the lower walls. Nothing obvious, no movement, and yet you pause, listening. The air carries a faint sound. Not footsteps, not voices, something softer, a shift of fabric, a breath held too long. You take one step closer, then another. Your staff touches the ground lightly, marking your presence without forcing it. The lantern lifts slightly, your light reaching deeper into the narrow space. A figure stands there, partially turned away, still, You do not speak immediately. You let the moment settle. Then, in a calm and measured tone, you acknowledge their presence. Not a question, not an accusation, simply a recognition that they are there and that you are aware of it. The figure turns slightly, enough to show their face in the edge of your light. Their expression is neutral. Careful, they nod once. A small gesture, then step back further into the passage, not fleeing but choosing distance. You remain where you are for a moment longer. Then lower your lantern slightly and step away. There is a lesser discussed pattern found in some city records that many nighttime encounters did not escalate into conflict, but instead resolved through subtle exchanges of presence and acknowledgement. The watchman did not always intervene directly. Sometimes simply being seen was enough. You return to the main street, your pace unchanged, your attention steady. A faint murmur reaches you from further ahead, carried unevenly through the narrow space. You follow it, not drawn by curiosity, but by duty. Two figures stand near a doorway, their voices low but tense. As you approach, the conversation stops abruptly, the silence that follows more telling than the sound that came before it. You lift your lantern slightly. The light falls across them. They shift. One steps back. The other turns away, adjusting their posture as if the moment had already passed. You do not question. You do not linger. You simply walk through the space between them, your presence clear, your role understood. Behind you, the quiet remains. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how community dynamics shaped the effectiveness of night watchmen. In neighborhoods where relationships were close and tensions familiar, the watchman often acted less as an enforcer and more as a stabilizing presence, a reminder that actions carried consequence. You feel that here, in the way voices stop, in the way bodies shift, in the way silence follows. The street continues bending slightly, leading you past a series of homes that appear less maintained than those you encountered earlier. The wood is worn, the paint faded, the signs of repair more visible. This part of the city feels different, not unsafe, but less certain. A window above opens briefly. A voice calls out low and quick, then disappears again before you can fully register its meaning. The window closes just as quickly, leaving behind only the faint echo of sound. You pause, listen. Nothing follows. You move on. A small object lies on the ground ahead, barely visible in the dim light. You approach carefully, your lantern revealing its shape. A dropped cloth, nothing more. You step past it. But take note, because even small things can mark a larger story. There is a quiet detail mentioned in some personal accounts that items left behind in the street often told their own stories, though rarely complete ones. A lost glove, a broken tool, a piece of fabric, each hinted at movement, at presence, at something that had already passed. You continue forward, your step steady, your awareness unchanged. The street opens slightly into another crossing, though smaller than the last. The ground here is uneven, the stones shifting slightly beneath your weight. You adjust your footing without thought, your body already accustomed to the subtle demands of the terrain. You lift the rattle, a firm turn. The sound carries through the space sharper here, bouncing between the closer walls, filling the crossing with a brief but unmistakable presence. Then it fades. You lower your hand and continue. The night feels deeper now, not darker, but more settled. The earlier movement has thinned. The sounds have spaced out further. What remains is more deliberate, more distinct. You follow the street as it narrows again, your lantern guiding you, your staff steady, your senses tuned to the quiet shifts that define this part of the city. And as you walk, you begin to understand something that does not appear in records or discussions. Most of what you do will never be seen. Most of what you prevent will never be known. The arguments that quiet before they grow, the movements that stop before they begin, the choices that change simply because you are there. This is your work, not loud, not dramatic, but constant. And in the stillness of this narrowing street, you carry it forward step by step into the deeper hours of the night. The street eases open again, and with that openness comes a subtle shift in atmosphere. The air feels less contained, carrying with it traces of something distant, something that does not belong entirely to this immediate space. You notice it first in the scent. Spice, faint, but unmistakable. It lingers lightly woven into the cooler night air as if carried from somewhere far beyond the reach of your lantern. You follow it. thinking, not chasing, just allowing your path to align with it. Ahead, the buildings begin to change again. Taller structures return their shapes more defined, their presence more deliberate. The street feels connected to something larger here, something that extends beyond the neighborhood and into the wider world. A warehouse comes into view, larger than the ones you passed before. Its doors are closed, secured with thick wood and iron fittings, yet its presence feels active, as if what lies within still carries motion even at rest. There is strong historical consensus that Amsterdam during this period stood at the centre of a vast trading network linking continents through goods, ships and information. The wealth you saw earlier in the homes of merchants did not begin there. It passed through places like this. You slow slightly as you pass. Your lantern light brushes across the surface of the doors, revealing marks left by years of use. Scratches, impressions, all signs of repeated contact. You pause, listen. Nothing unusual, just the quiet weight of stored goods behind solid barriers. There is a lesser mentioned detail found in shipping records. The goods arriving in Amsterdam often came from far distances, carrying not only economic value but unfamiliar scents, textures and materials that subtly altered the sensory landscape of the city itself. You notice that now. In the air, in the faint spice, in the way this part of the street feels slightly different from the rest. You continue along the warehouse, your steps steady, your attention outward. A narrow gap between buildings appears ahead, toward a secondary passage that runs parallel to the main street. You angle your lantern toward it. The light reveals stacked crates arranged with care, their surfaces marked with symbols you do not fully recognize. Letters, perhaps, signs of origin, indications of ownership. You step closer, not entering fully, just enough to observe. The crates are still, untouched, yet their presence suggests movement that has only recently paused. There is an ongoing academic conversation about how global trade influenced not just the economy of Amsterdam, but its daily life, its smells, its textures, even its sense of identity. Standing here beside these silent containers, you feel that influence more directly than before. The world has arrived here, and now it rests. You step back onto the main street. Your lantern light shifts with you, returning to its steady path ahead. The scent of spice fades slightly as you move away, replaced once more by the more familiar tones of wood smoke and damp stone. A figure appears at the far end of the street, standing near another warehouse. Still, you approach with measured steps, your presence clear but not confrontational. The figure does not move as you near their posture, steady, their attention focused on something just out of your view. You lift your lantern slightly. The light reveals their face. Calm, focused, not startled by your presence. They nod once, then gesture briefly toward the warehouse behind them as if indicating their purpose. A worker, or perhaps a guard of another kind. You return the nod and continue. There is a quieter point noted in some historical discussions that not all activity at night was unregulated. Certain roles required presence even after dark, especially in areas tied closely to trade and storage. The city did not fully close. It shifted. You feel that here, in the stillness that is not empty, in the presence that is not idle. The street bends slightly, leading you past another row of structures where the architecture feels more uniform again. The connection to trade begins to soften, though it does not disappear entirely. You notice how your awareness adjusts, less focused on enclosed spaces, more on open movement. A faint sound reaches you from behind. A cart. Distant. Slow. You turn your head slightly, listening as the sound grows clearer, then steadies into a consistent rhythm. Wheels against stone or wood under strain. Movement that continues even in the later hours. You do not turn fully. You simply note it and continue forward. There is a small detail mentioned in some travel accounts that Amsterdam's streets were never entirely still even at night due to the demands of trade and transport. Goods arrived at all hours, and the city adapted to that constant flow. You lift the rattle, a measured turn. The sound carries outward, intersecting briefly with the distant rhythm of the cart, then fading back into the night. You lower your hand and walk on, The street narrows again, though not as tightly as before. The sense of openness lingers, shaped now by what you have just passed. The knowledge that beyond these quiet walls lie connections to places far beyond your reach. You move steadily, your lantern guiding you, your staff grounding you, your presence unchanged. And as you walk, you begin to understand something that extends beyond the immediate streets around you. This city is not only what you see, it's also what passes through it. What arrives, what leaves, what rests even briefly within its walls. And tonight you are not only watching over a neighborhood, you are watching over a place that belongs in part to the wider world. The scent of spice fades behind you, replaced once more by the familiar mixture of damp stone, faint smoke, and the lingering stillness of late hours. The street narrows again, drawing you back into the quieter fabric of the city where movement becomes less frequent and each sound carries a little further. Your steps remain steady. Your lantern sways gently. The rhythm of your patrol continues without interruption, yet something shifts, not in the street, but in how it feels. You begin to notice the way certain windows remain closed. Even as your light passes, their shutters drawn tighter than others. A door you approach seems to pause before opening, then remains shut. A figure glimpsed at a distance turns away more quickly than expected. It is subtle, but present. There is a broadly accepted interpretation among historians that night, watchmen often occupied an uncertain position within the communities they served. They were necessary, relied upon, yet not always admired. Their presence reminded others of rules of order of observation. You sense that now, not in any direct rejection, but in small adjustments, a quiet distance. You continue along the street, your posture unchanged, your attention steady. You do not seek acknowledgement. You do not expect it. Your role is not built on approval. It's built on consistency. A faint sound reaches you from above. A window opens just slightly. You glance up. A face appears briefly in the gap, watching not with curiosity, but with something closer to assessment. The moment lasts only a second before the window closes again, the figure withdrawing back into the safety of interior light. You move on. There is a lesser-known observation found in some personal accounts that watchmen were sometimes viewed with mild suspicion, especially in neighborhoods where familiarity bred a sense of independence. The idea of being watched even for safety was not always welcomed. You feel that here, in the way attention meets you then retreats, in the way presence is acknowledged but not embraced. You pass a small shop, its front closed, its sign hanging slightly askew. The wood shows signs of wear, the edges softened by time and use. A faint mark near the handle suggests frequent opening and closing, the rhythm of daily trade now paused. You pause briefly, not to impede, but to listen. Nothing. Only the quiet continuation of the night. There is an ongoing scholarly conversation about how much authority watchmen truly exercise, particularly in comparison to other forms of local governance. Some argue their power was limited, their role symbolic. Others suggest that their consistent presence gave them a quieter, more pervasive influence. As you stand here, the distinction feels less important, because what you do is not about power. It is about presence. You continue forward. The street bends slightly, leading you past another row of homes where the light is almost entirely gone. Only a faint glow remains in one upper window, dim enough that it seems more memory than illumination. Your lantern becomes the primary source of light here. Its circle defines your path. Everything beyond it fades. You lift the rattle, a short deliberate turn. The sound spreads outward, filling the space briefly before dissolving into the stillness. It feels sharper here, more contained, as if the narrow street holds it longer before letting it go. You lower your hand and continue. A figure appears ahead, seated on a low step outside a doorway. Their postures relaxed, their presence unhurried, as if they have chosen to remain outside despite the late hour. You approach, not changing your pace, not altering your path. As you near the figure glances up, their expression calm, almost indifferent. There is no sign of concern, no attempt to move away. You pass, they remain. There is a small, often overlooked detail mentioned in some local narratives that not everyone retreated indoors at night. Some individuals preferred the quiet of the street, the stillness, the space it offered. away from enclosed rooms. You do not question it. You simply note it and continue. The street opens slightly ahead, revealing a wider crossing where several paths meet. The ground here is uneven, marked by years of use, its surface reflecting your lantern in broken fragments. You step into the centre. Pause. Listen. A distant bell. Faint. Another watchman, perhaps. Calling the hour somewhere beyond your immediate route. The sound reaches you. Softened, carried across distance and space, a reminder that you are not alone in this work, even if you rarely see those who share it. You take a slow breath, then move on. There is a quieter reflection found in some historical writings that the role of the watchman often existed between visibility and anonymity, seen but not always known, heard but not always remembered. You feel that now? In the way the city responds to you, in the way it continues around you, unchanged. You follow the street as it narrows once more, your lantern guiding you. Your staff steady, your steps even. The night feels deeper now, not heavier, but more complete, as if it has fully settled into itself. And within it you continue, not seeking recognition, not expecting. Thanks. Simply walking, watching, holding your place in a system that depends on you, even if it rarely says so. And as you move through this quieter stretch, you understand something with quiet clarity. You're right there. So part of the city, but never fully within it. Always just at the edge, where light meets shadow, where presence meets distance, where your work continues whether it is noticed or not. The crossing fades behind you and the street draws you into a quieter channel, where sound begins to take on a different role. It is no longer something that interrupts the silence. It becomes the way you read it. You notice this gradually. At first, it is simply the absence of larger noises. No carts, no raised voices, no doors closing in quick succession. What remains is finer, more delicate. The kind of sound that would disappear during the day but now carries weight. Your footsteps, soft, regular, measured. They mark your presence with a consistency that feels almost reassuring. The stone beneath you answers each step with a muted tone slightly different depending on where you place your weight. You begin to recognize the variations. A hollow note near a drain, a duller sound where the stone has worn unevenly, a sharper echo where the street narrows. There is a widely accepted observation among historians that experienced watchmen relied heavily on sound as much as sight, especially in conditions where light was limited. The ear often noticed what the eye could not. You feel that now. Your lantern continues to guide you, but your attention begins to shift outward, listening as much as looking. A faint drip reaches you from somewhere ahead. Water, not from the canal, from above. You glance upward, just as a small drop falls from the edge of a roof, catching your lantern light for a brief moment before disappearing into the sandstone below. Then another, a slow, steady rhythm. You continue forward your steps, aligning unconsciously with the pattern. Drip, step, drip, step. The night builds itself through repetition. You pass beneath a narrow arch where two buildings meet overhead, creating a brief tunnel of shadow. The sound changes immediately. Your footsteps echo more clearly here, returning to you in softened layers. You pause, not long, just enough to listen. The echo fades, then returns, but not from you. Another step. Distant, you remain still. Your lantern lifts slightly, its light pushing forward into the darker stretch beyond the arch. The space ahead appears empty, but the sound has already told you otherwise. You wait. The step comes again, closer now, slow, deliberate. You shift your stance slightly, not defensive but grounded, allowing your presence to settle into the space before the figure emerges. And then they do. A person steps into the edge of your light, their outline forming gradually rather than suddenly. Their pace matches your expectation, their movement controlled, neither hurried nor hesitant. You hold your position. They continue. As they pass, the sound of their footsteps replaces yours, for a moment then blends with it, then separates again as your paths diverge. No words, only sound. There is a lesser-known detail found in some observational writings that the rhythm of footsteps at night could reveal more than appearance alone. Speed, weight, hesitation all carried meaning even when nothing was spoken. You resume walking, your pace set. Your attention sharpened. The street opens slightly beyond the arch, revealing a broader stretch where the air feels less confined. The sounds shift again, spreading out, losing their sharpness as space increases. You hear a door in the distance. Not closing, opening, slowly. The hinge creaks, a drawn-out sound that lingers in the air longer than expected. You angle your lantern toward the source, though the distance keeps the details unclear. A figure steps out, pauses, then disappears again as the door closes behind them. The sound settles. Gone. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how much of the night's activity went unrecorded, existing only in moments like this, isolated, leaving no trace beyond memory. You continue. The street curves, gently leading you along a path where the sound of water returns, though softer than before. Not the open canal, but a smaller channel, partially hidden its presence, suggested more by sound than sight. You slow slightly. Listen. The water moves steadily, brushing against stone in a quiet, consistent rhythm. It blends with your steps, creating a layered soundscape that feels both natural and deliberate. You lift the rattle. A measured turn. The sound cuts across the softer tones, sharper, more defined, establishing your presence clearly within the space. Then it fades, leaving the water and your footsteps to fill the silence once more. You lower your hand and continue. A faint breeze moves through the street, just enough to stir loose elements. A hanging sign shifts slightly. A piece of cloth brushes against a wall. The sounds are small but distinct, each one marking movement in a space that otherwise remains still. You begin to understand how the night speaks, not in words, but in patterns, in repetitions, in interruption. Each sound carries information, each absence carries meaning. You pass another narrow passage, its entrance dark, its depth unclear. You do not enter. You do not need to. The absence of sound from within tells you enough. Stillness. Complete. You move on. The street widens again, the sounds thinning as space increases. Your footsteps soften. The water fades. The breeze settles. For a moment there is almost nothing. Then in the distance a bell. Faint. Another watchman. Another voice. Another presence. You listen. Not for long, just enough to acknowledge it. Then you continue your own rhythm, unchanged, your own path steady. Because while the night may be shared, your portion of it remains yours to walk. Step by step, sound by sound, you move through it, not just seeing the city, but hearing it, reading it, understanding it in ways that daylight never allows. And as you walk, you realize that the silence is never truly empty. It's filled with everything that chooses not to be seen. The distant bell fades, and for a moment the city feels as though it is holding its breath. The rhythm you have settled into carries you forward your steps, even your lantern steady, your awareness keeps balance between sound and stillness. Then something breaks that balance. It begins as a single shout, sharp, sudden, not far. You stop. Your lantern lifts instinctively, its light reaching outward as if it could catch the source before your ears fully understand it. The sound does not repeat immediately, but it lingers in the air, its echo stretching just enough to suggest direction. Ahead. To your left. You turn. Your pace changes not into a run, but into something more focused, more direct. Each step becomes firmer, your staff striking the ground with clearer intent. Another sound follows. Voices this time. More than one. Raised as and not yet chaotic. You move toward it. The street narrows as you approach the buildings, closing in, amplifying the sound so that it reaches you in uneven bursts. A word rises above the rest, then disappears before you can fully grasp it. You lift the rattle, a strong turn. The sound cuts sharply through the air, louder than before, more urgent, filling the narrow space with a clear signal. Your presence is here. The voices shift, not gone, but altered. You continue forward. The lantern light reaches the edge of the disturbance, revealing shapes rather than details. Two figures, close, their movements tense, contained, as if something has already happened, or is about to. You slow, not stopping, but controlling your approach. There is well-supported evidence in historical records that night watchmen were expected to respond quickly to disturbances, though not always to resolve them alone. Their role was often to interrupt, to draw attention, to prevent escalation until more help could arrive. You feel that expectation now, in the way your body holds itself. in the way your tools become more than objects. You step closer. The figures come into clearer view. Two men standing near a doorway, their posture rigid, their attention fixed on each other. One gestures sharply. The other responds with a movement that suggests resistance rather than retreat. You lift your lantern higher. The light falls directly between them. They pause, just for a moment, long enough. You do not shout. You do not command. You simply stand. Your presence fills the space in a different way than their tension. Steady, visible, unmoving. One of them glances toward you, then the other. The moment stretches, then breaks. The gestures soften. The distance between them increases only slightly, but enough to shift the direction of what might have followed. There is a lesser-known pattern mentioned in some local reports that many conflicts at night dissolve not through force, but through interruption. The presence of a witness, especially one representing order, often changed the outcome before it fully formed. You hold your position a moment longer, then lower the lantern slightly. The men do not resume. One turns away. The other remains but no longer advances. You step past them, not turning your back fully, but not lingering either. Your role is not to remain. It is to restore movement. Behind you, the voices do not rise again. The street absorbs the moment, returning gradually to its quieter state, though. The air still holds a trace of what occurred. You continue forward, your pace steady once more, but your awareness remains heightened. A faint sound reaches you from further ahead. Running. Light. Quick! You turn your head slightly, your lantern shifting with the motion. A figure crosses the far end of the street, moving fast enough to blur the edges of their form in the low light. You pause. Listen. The footsteps fade quickly, their direction unclear once they leave your immediate range. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how often watchmen encountered situations they could not fully resolve events that began or ended beyond their reach. The night did not offer complete information. It offered fragments. You move again, not chasing, not pursuing, because not every movement requires action. Some only require acknowledgement. The street ahead feels unsettled for a few moments longer, as if the earlier disturbance has left a faint imprint on the space. The sounds are slower to return the quiet less immediate. You lift the rattle once more. A firm, deliberate turn. The sound spreads through the street sharper than before, more intentional, as if reinforcing the order that has just been restored. Then it fades. You lower your hand and continue. Your steps gradually return to their earlier rhythm. The tension easing, your breath settling back into its steady pace. The lantern light steadies its glow, no longer stretched by urgency. The city begins to recover. Not visibly, but subtly. A window opens slightly, then closes. A distant door shifts. A faint voice resumes somewhere beyond your view. Life for me? Oh, yeah. Continue. The moment has passed. You walk on your presence, returning to its quieter form, your role once again defined not by interruption, but by continuity. And as you move deeper into the night, you carry with you the understanding that not every danger announces itself clearly. Some arrive suddenly, briefly, then disappear, leaving behind only the knowledge that you were there, and that for a moment that was enough. The disturbance settles behind you, not erased, but absorbed into the wider quiet of the city. Your steps regain their earlier rhythm, though a faint awareness lingers, a reminder that the night can shift without warning and just as quickly return to calm. The air feels cooler now, not sharply, but enough that you notice it with each breath. You draw your coat slightly closer, not out of discomfort, but instinct, the same quiet adjustment you have made countless times already without thinking. Ahead, the street stretches longer than before its length, unbroken its surface, reflecting your lantern in a soft, uneven line. The mist has thinned almost entirely, leaving the air clearer, the edges of buildings more defined again. You continue forward, your lantern steady, your staff grounded, your breathing even. This is the part of the night where time feels different, slower, more extended, as if each moment holds a little longer before giving way to the next. There is a well-supported interpretation among historians that the hours just before dawn were often the most difficult for night watchmen, not because of increased danger, but because of fatigue. The body begins to anticipate rest even when the work is not yet complete. You feel that now, not as exhaustion, but as a subtle weight, a quiet pull. Your steps remain steady, but they require a little more intention. Your awareness remains sharp, but it rests on a thinner edge balanced between alertness and the growing sense that the night is nearing its end. A faint sound reaches you from somewhere ahead, not movement, not voice, something softer. You pause, listen. A bird. Its call brief, uncertain, as if testing the air before committing to morning. You lift your gaze slightly. The sky remains dark, yet something has changed. Not visible, but present. There is a lesser-known observation found in some personal writings that the earliest signs of dawn often appeared in sound before light, birds' distant activity, subtle shifts that signaled the approach of morning long before it could be seen. You continue. Your steps carry you toward a familiar canal, its surface calmer now, its reflection steadier. The water feels less like a hidden presence and more like a quiet companion again, its rhythm unchanged, its movement consistent. You pause briefly at that edge. Not for long, just enough to observe. The lantern light rests on the surface, no longer broken by rain, no longer scattered by wind. It holds more clearly, though still imperfect, shifting gently with each small movement of water. You move on, the street curves leading you past buildings that feel quieter than before, their windows fully dark, their interiors surrendered to rest. The city has reached a deeper stillness, one that feels closer to completion than to beginning. A figure appears ahead, seated, still. You approach with the same steady pace, your presence clear your light, revealing the outline gradually. An older man, wrapped in a coat, his posture relaxed, his gaze unfocused, as if he is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. You pass. He does not move. There is a small detail mentioned in some accounts that certain individuals, especially those without stable homes, often remained outside through the night, adapting to its rhythm in ways others did not. You take note, then continue. The street widens slightly, revealing a distant glow. Not lantern light. Softer, more diffuse. You pause. Just briefly, then walk toward it. The glow does not brighten quickly. It lingers at the edge of perception, a suggestion rather than a presence. The sky above shifts almost imperceptibly, the darkness easing just enough to allow the faintest trace of change. You lift the rattle, a gentle turn. The sound carries outward, quieter now, less sharp, as if the night itself no longer requires the same intensity. Then it fades. You lower your hand and continue. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about how watchmen experienced the transition from night to day, whether it felt like a clear boundary or a gradual blending of states. As you walk, it feels like the latter. The night does not end. It softens. It releases. Your steps feel lighter now, not because the work is done, but because the end is near. A distant door opens, not cautiously, but normally. A sign, small, but clear. You continue forward, your lantern still guiding you, though its importance begins to lessen as the ambient light slowly grows. The city begins to stir, not fully, but enough. A window opens slightly, a faint movement inside, a shift. You walk on, your present still steady, your role not yet complete but approaching its natural close. And as you move through these final stretches of the night, you begin to understand something that cannot be measured or recorded. The work you have done does not end with a single moment. It fades, like the darkness, gradually, quietly, until it's no longer needed. The faint glow ahead grows a little clearer as you continue, though it never rushes toward brightness. It arrives slowly, almost cautiously, as if the morning is testing whether the night is ready to release its hold. Your lantern still burns. But you notice the change. Its light no longer defines everything around you. The edges of buildings begin to emerge on their own, their outlines soft but visible. The street no longer depends entirely on your flame. You walk on, your steps steady, your breath calm. The city begins to shift, not in sound at first, but in presence. A window opens more fully now, the movement unhurried, unhidden. A figure appears, stretching slightly, their attention turning outward rather than inward. The first gestures of day begin to take shape. There is a well-established understanding that early morning marked a transition not just in light but in responsibility. The work of the watch did not end abruptly. It passed gradually into the hands of those who would fill the streets once more. You feel that transition as you walk, Your role does not disappear. It lightens. A distant cart moves again, its wheels louder now against the waking quiet. The sound does not feel out of place. It feels expected, part of the return. You follow the street as it opens toward a broader space, one you passed earlier in darkness. Now it appears different. Not fully revealed, but enough that you recognize it with ease. Familiar, changed. You slow slightly, not out of fatigue, but out of awareness. This is where your night begins to close. There is a small, often overlooked detail in some historical reflections that watchmen rarely marked the end of their shift with ceremony. There was no moment of announcement, no clear signal. The work simply gave way to the day. You continue walking, your lantern still in hand, your staff steady, the rattle quiet. The sky above shifts further, the darkness thinning into a muted grey that spreads slowly, touching rooftops, then windows, then the street itself. You notice how your senses adjust again. Sound becomes less isolated, more layered. Voices begin to return, faint at first, then clearer. A door opens, another follows. Movement resumes, not all at once, but in a series of small beginnings. You pass a house where the door stands slightly open. Inside, someone moves with purpose, their steps quick, their attention focused on the tasks of the day ahead. You do not pause. You do not need to. Your presence here is no longer the center. It is part of the edge. There is an ongoing academic discussion about how visible the watchmen remained during the early hours of morning. Some accounts suggest they faded into the background quickly, their role absorbed by the growing activity around them. You feel that happening now. The city begins to fill in around you. Your footsteps, once distinct, now blend with others. Your light, once central, now secondary. You lift the rattle one final time. A soft turn. The sound carries but gently, more like a closing note than a call. It reaches the waking streets, touches the edges of doorways, windows and movement, then fades. You lower your hand and continue. A figure passes you, moving in the opposite direction, their pace brisk, their attention fixed on the day ahead. They do not look at you, not out of disregard, but because their focus has already shifted forward. You walk on. The lantern in your hand feels different now. Not heavier, but less necessary. The light it casts grows faint against the rising day, its glow absorbed by the expanding grey around you. You begin to lower it, not extinguishing it, just allowing it to rest closer away. Closer to your hold. The street ahead brightens slightly more, the details of stone and structure returning with quiet clarity. The city you walked through in shadow reveals itself again, though changed by the memory of night. You take a slow breath. The air feels lighter, not warmer, but less weighted. The night releases its hold, and you release yours. You reach the place where your watch began, though it feels different now. The door stands closed to the space within quiet, waiting for the next cycle to begin. You pause, just for a moment, not out of necessity, but out of habit. Then you turn, not back into the night, but toward the day. There is a quiet understanding that the work you have done will not be seen in full. The streets remain intact, the doors remain closed, the windows remain unbroken. What did not happen leaves no mark, and yet it matters. You begin to walk away, your steps lighter now, your roll easing as the city takes over its own rhythm once more. The lantern dims further against the morning light. The staff rests more easily in your hand. The rattle remains silent. And as you move into the waking city, you carry with you the quiet knowledge that for a few hours you held the balance between order and uncertainty. Not through force, not through command, but through presence. The light continues to grow. The city awakens, and your watch for now is complete. You slow your pace as the sounds of morning begin to gather in a gentle way around you. Doors open with less caution now, their hinges no longer hesitant. Voices rise not sharply, but with the ease of familiarity, greeting the day rather than questioning it. Your steps soften, not from effort, but from release. The night no longer asks anything of you. You allow your shoulders to ease the quiet tension you carried, without noticing now dissolving into something lighter. The lantern hangs loosely at your side, its glow nearly invisible against the growing light. It has done its work. So have you. The sky continues its slow transformation, the grey lifting into something softer, something that promises warmth. even if it has not yet arrived. The rooftops catch that change first, then the windows, then the ground beneath your feet. You walk without urgency now, no longer marking time, no longer measuring distance, just moving. The sounds of the city gather gently, layering one upon another in a way that feels calm rather than overwhelming. A cart rolling, a voice calling, a door closing with purpose rather than caution. Life resumes, and you step away from it, not entirely separate but no longer at its centre. Your breath steadies, your thoughts quiet. The memory of the night lingers, not as something heavy, but as something complete. You have walked the streets, you have listened, you have watched, and now you rest. Not in a place, but in the simple act of letting go. The lantern lowers, the staff relaxes in your grip, the city continues without you. And that is as it should be. So as the morning settles fully into place and the last traces of night slip gently away, you allow yourself to drift with that same quiet ease. Nothing more is required, nothing more is expected. Only stillness, only rest, only the soft fading of one world into another. Sweet dreams.